You're with Clement Maniatella.
702.
So now we start a conversation with Dr. Corne Mulder, who is the president of the Freedom Front Plus. As I said to you earlier on, this is a party that is part of the government of national unity. It's a party that also, I think, wants to start appealing more to other minorities beyond just the Afrikaner group. So we're going to talk about the party, talk about them being part of the government of national unity, where they see us as a country, where we are and where we're moving. So I would like you to join this conversation as well. You're welcome to give us a call on 011-883-0702. You can send WhatsApps on 072-702-1702 or post your comments there or your questions there on YouTube. You can go to the 702 YouTube page if you want to watch what's happening here in studio. Dr. Mulder, thank you so much for making time for us. Thank you for coming to studio. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Clement. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be on your show. It's an honor and a privilege to be participating, and it's good to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. I just want to start off first by talking about, the government of national unity, because it's, it's, some people are describing them as teething problems. When you look at coalitions across the world, they've got all sorts of challenges, and this is the first time sort of in post-democratic South Africa where we have a coalition of this nature at the national level. As the Freedom Front Plus being part of this coalition government, what is your assessment so far? Are you still happy to be part of it? Because there are certain decisions that I suppose have been taken that other parties like the Democratic Alliance have felt we don't agree with that, and they've decided to go the court route. What's your assessment so far as the Freedom Front Plus?
Yes, now let me put it this way. The Freedom Front Plus was very strongly in favor of the government of national unity after the election of last year. We thought that would be the right thing to do. But I am concerned that at the moment we are not dealing with teething problems. I think it's much more serious than that.
Yeah.
And there are various reasons for that. If you study coalitions internationally, what normally happens is that after election and you need to form a coalition, parties have ample time to come together and to negotiate amongst themselves, because no party's mandate received sufficient support to be governing on their own. So what they normally do is they come together and they negotiate a new mandate, which becomes the mandate of their coalition government or their government of national unity. And then everybody is committed to that new platform or that new mandate, and that new mandate has to be a compromise between the different parties within that coalition government. We have not done that, and there are various reasons for that. I think first of all because our constitution forces us to form a government within 14 days after the election. Our constitution was not written to accommodate coalition government, so we had to elect a president within 14 days. That happened, I think, on the 14th of June. The president then appointed the executive, but we have not spent time to negotiate and agree on a joint platform, and I think that is what's happening at the moment, where we have different policy views and each party implements their own, and that creates lots of tension and problems at the moment.
And I remember reading the statement of intent after it was signed, and I always go back to this when I talk even to the DA and the ANC, is that statement of intent spoke to the need for the government of national unity to have an agreed policy agenda. I mean, there's still not an agreed policy agenda.
Exactly. If you look at the Declaration of Intent, you'll see that it's framed in broad principle terms, basically. And it's focusing on economic growth and job creation, which is fine, and we all support that. But then in the government, in the Declaration of Intent, it referred to there should be a national dialogue. And the understanding was that all these details should be sorted out at the national dialogue as soon as possible, and then that becomes the platform of the government of national unity. Now, it's a year later, we have not had the national dialogue. And even when we had some discussions with the president recently, it seems to me that we may even differ in terms of what the intent would be with the national dialogue. So you're absolutely correct. At the moment, there's no national platform that we are all implementing and all are committed to.
Yeah. So the question then is, because the DA also often complains a lot about some decisions that are taken, policy decisions that are contrary to what they would like to see or what their constituency would like to see. Then the question is, then why do you then stay in the GNU? And for you as the Freedom Front Plus, do you see yourself staying in even when you are still unhappy about, some of the nitty-gritties you've mentioned? I mean, some people have come out to say, and I say this in inverted commas for lack of a better phrase, it's almost like you're the voting cow, so to speak, as other parties. Like the DA ANC just needs you to just rubber stamp their policy and their agreements. Is that really then the need for you to stay in this GNU?
Definitely not. If that is going to be the process, and if that's going to be how things are going to happen in future as well, the thing will collapse very sooner than later. It will simply collapse. Now, the problem is this: that originally, as I've said, the government was set up, and the executive was then appointed by the president, and ministers got involved in different portfolios, and they are starting to do their work. Then, basically, in terms of decisions taken by the Government of National Unity, I don't think sufficient decisions have been taken. For example, there were quite a lot of unhappiness with regard to the Bella Act, with regard to expropriation without compensation, the national health insurance. And then the ANC correctly pointed out and said, but wait, these things are all part of the Sixth Parliament. They were agreed by the Sixth Parliament, and all what happened now was the President acted in terms of what is expected of him, and he put those things into law by signing them, which is technically correct. We haven't seen real policy decisions in terms of the Government of National Unity, because that will be the first indication. Even with regard to international relations, the ANC has quite clearly stated that, and I can't think that the DA accepted that in negotiations, that is the exclusive domain of one party. That cannot be the case, but that's what happened basically. So I think the budget issue, which we went through, and we are still in that process, gave the opportunity for basically a reset of the whole idea and the whole process within the Government of National Unity. Mm-hmm. And it seems that there's acceptance in that regard. The ANC also now talks about a reset. But once again, we may find that we have different interpretations of what we mean with the reset.
Yeah, just like there was different interpretation with that clause in the statement of intent that speaks to sufficient consensus, and
exactly,
and the DA and the ANC also interpreting it differently. Okay,
exactly.
How do you justify to your support base being part of the GNU? Has it been difficult? Because, I mean, you are now in the GNU with a party. I mean, the ANC is the biggest party in the GNU. It's a party that supports race-based policies, whether it's the black economic empowerment, or maybe you want to talk about land expropriation or employment equity legislation, which the DA is taking to court because they don't agree with the amendment to the Employment Equity Act. Among the Afrikaner support base, is there concern about you being part of the GNU?
Yes, there is. And what we did was, our approach from the beginning was, if you can be a partner around the table where the decisions are taken that affects the lives of all South Africans, also our own constituency. If you can be around that table, you need to be there. You need to be participating and trying to make a difference in also getting the issues that are important to your constituency to be dealt with, etc., etc. And as long as that is possible, I would like to see us participate in the process. But we have not reached that kind of situation or that kind of process at the moment. At the moment, it seems that the ANC wants to treat the other parties basically there just to provide the necessary votes. And that is the case. Let me just give you an example. If you come together as parties, and there are 10 parties within the Government of National Unity, then you are supposed to be committed to one another in terms of your agreement which you signed. And then you need to negotiate and find a compromise until you agree with one another or reach sufficient consensus. With regard to the budget, what the ANC then did was to go to parties outside the Government of National Unity to get sufficient numbers in Parliament to get the fiscal framework agreed on. That is basically almost like infidelity. That's just unacceptable, because what happens to trust within the Government of National Unity when that happens, and the same can be said on the other side, if one of the parties don't find a compromise internally but goes to the court, as the DA did, it also breaches all the trust. So there's a huge trust deficit at the moment from all sides.
Yeah. Okay, so we've spoken about the GNU. I want us now to speak about the Freedom Front Plus as an organization. And I'm sure you come across this a lot, where people think of the Freedom Front Plus as this racist organization that represents, they care about Afrikaners, they've got apartheid nostalgia. Help us understand about the formation of the Freedom Front Plus, and why do you exist? Who do you represent? What are your values?
I think the point of departure you'll find in the name of the party, Freedom Front. Freedom, it's about freedom. Freedom is a very strong and central theme within the Afrikaner community. You can go look at our history. We want to say that we were one of the first peoples in Africa that fought against the colonial power, which were Britain at the time, the British Empire, when we fought for independence in the First and the Second Anglo-Boer Wars. So that is a very strong theme within the Afrikaner community. So when we got to 1994, there was a very strong feeling at the time that the National Party, or the government at the time, that they were going to sell us out. It was going to be a terrible situation where the ANC and the Communist Party comes into power. And I was there at the moment. I was part of that processes. And a lot of people were preparing basically to defend themselves and to prevent that in an armed struggle. There were talks about a civil war at that stage, and some of the older people around will remember those days. We then argued as a group of young politicians in the then Conservative Party that you have to be part of the process, you have to participate. And we tried to convince the Conservative Party, who were the official opposition at the time, that they needed to participate. They refused. We were then expelled because we didn't want to accept that kind of decision by the Conservative Party. And then we formed the Freedom Front. And the Freedom Front was then formed. The first leader was General Constant Viljoen. We participated in that election. We did quite well. And then we entered into negotiations. Well, even during the election, before the election period at CODESA, we were involved in negotiations with the ANC. And then we continued with that in terms of writing of the current constitution, etc. So the party started off as a party basically coming from with the support base of the Afrikaner community. That's where we came from. But we realize that the Afrikaners has been a minority since ever. We've always been a minority. So about 8-9 years ago, the party changed its mandate and its mission statement to say, but we don't want to be a party only exclusively for the Afrikaner community. Yes, that is our base where we came from. But we want to be a party for the rights of minorities in South Africa, all minorities. And we think we also need a vehicle that are fighting for the rights of minorities. Because that takes you to the definition of what is really a democracy. And some people will say, well, democracy means one person, one vote. And we will say, no, be very careful that you don't end up with a majority, tyranny of a majority in terms of that. You also need to ask, how are your minorities protected that they feel part and parcel of the greater scheme? And that is where the party positioned itself. Interesting enough, right from the beginning, when they formed the party in 1994, our constitution clearly made a provision to say, any South African, no race, no nothing, any South African 16 years and older who subscribes to the values and the credo of the party are welcome to join. But I've always said in the party way back, nobody believes you unless they can visibly see that people from other communities join the party. And since we changed the mission statement about 9 years ago, we've now have members from other minorities and other groups in South Africa who are members of our party.
Yeah. So you speak a lot about earlier on when you start. It starts with the foundation. You fought for freedom. And then some people may argue that, yes, after fighting for that freedom, then what you did is you curtailed freedom. Well, not you, but, some of the people who fought there, of Africa, who were from the Afrikaner group, then they curtailed the same freedom they fought for, they curtailed it for the black majority in the country. How do you deal with that as a Freedom Front Plus? Do you think there's enough appreciation of what that system created and the need to resolve the consequences that came with that system that was created?
Yes, I think we understand that. We realize the implications of our past, and we take note of that, and we understand that. I can't argue on behalf of the previous people that were part of that system at the time. They were trying to find a solution from their perspective, dealing with what was called then, obviously, arbitrary colonial boundaries drawn by colonial powers who forced different peoples into one geographical area and say, well, go on and govern yourselves, which created a challenge to a certain extent. But from our party's perspective, we understand the past, we understand the challenges in that instance, and we've accepted that reality right from the beginning, and we've always said, we want to be a constructive force. And I think one of the reasons why the Freedom Front Plus has succeeded, if you look at the ballot paper, for example, in 1994, a huge number of parties have come and gone. But we have been there throughout each and every election. Before every election, everybody says goodbye and we will never see you again. And then we are back after the election because we want to be and we continue to be a positive and a constructive force, because in the end we want to create a future for all our children. We share this wonderful, beautiful South Africa.
How do you think we can try and resolve those consequences that you say you appreciate as the Freedom Front Plus that have been brought by apartheid? Because, well, what the Constitution then expresses is the need for us to be intentional, or let me say for government to be intentional about addressing the injustices of the past. How do you think we can do that? Because I think even on the open line today, we were talking about the Employment Equity Act and the amendments to that, and, you know, these numerical targets that the Minister of Labour can set and ask even companies to set their own targets, because there's the situation is not changing in corporate South Africa at the top managerial level. You still see that there are some other races that are not being represented there. What, beyond just the BEE has been abused, or what do you think as the Freedom Front Plus is a way we can try and level the playing field, because it's not leveled now?
Yeah. I think the first problem we have is that our recipe for nation building is wrong. And let me try to explain that. The recipe for nation building is, from my perspective, has been around sport since 1994. You remember, first was the Rugby World Cup where Mr. Mandela was at there and everybody was happy and it was wonderful. We won the World Cup. And then South Africa participated in the World Cricket Cup. We fell out in the quarterfinals. That was not a big success. Then we bid for the Olympics and everybody was all excited, the Soccer World Cup. And every time when we've got one of these sporting events, people get all excited and we unite as a nation. But it doesn't last. It's only while this is happening and then we start again looking at each other from different perspectives in a negative manner, I think. Our view is that nation building will only succeed if we really give credence to our logo and our slogan in South Africa to say unity in diversity, which means recognize the diversity. That's why our Constitution says 11 official languages. We are a very diverse society, and find formulas where you recognize the diversity, where people can also express themselves in terms of their language, their culture, etc., etc. And the democratic system must also accommodate that one group doesn't feel threatened or being discriminated by each other, another group, if I can put it that way. Now, the problem is it's a difficult challenge, and as you correctly point out, what the Constitution says and what the government is trying to achieve with equity and with employment, etc., etc. But the facts on the ground indicate that it's not succeeding. It's something is very seriously wrong with that approach. I looked last night at the report from the African Development Bank, and there's also a report from the International Monetary Fund. In 1994, South Africa had the strongest economy in Africa. At the moment, there are 44 of the 54 states in Africa that have a bigger and higher growth rate than South Africa. We fell completely behind. And if you look at unemployment, it's tragic that we sit with a 40% unemployment rate. If you come to the youth, it's about 60%. So clearly the economy is not succeeding, the economy is not growing. Now the ANC would argue to say, well, we need to implement these quotas, etc., then it will make a difference. I don't think so. I think the opposite is true. We must allow the economy to grow and see how can we inspire people, motivate companies to employ more people, to spend the capital that they've got in their accounts, not to keep that and not invest and expand their companies. I think when we can get to that and get the economy to really grow and get people employed and give people equal opportunities in that regard, I think we will succeed in eradicating the inequalities in South Africa.
So the other argument is that we have been there where there are some positives in as far as economic growth is concerned. You know, in our democracy, there are some people who mention the Mbeki administration, some will mention just the beginning of the Zuma administration and how you started seeing the economy sort of strengthening before things started taking a downslide again. And even during that time, you still don't have a lot of black people becoming participants in the economy. So at some point also it becomes about dignity. You know, yesterday I went to my village and I went to, as I was passing to go see my parents, I went past my high school and I walked in and I spoke to some students there who go to that high school I went to, and one of them comes to me and says, I'm struggling. Mom is a domestic worker, and because as you know, about the opportunities that were not available for black people. There are a lot of black people that have done manual jobs, and as a result, they've not been able to take their kids to school. This kid says to me, "Mom is a domestic worker. I'm repeating grade 12, not because I want to, because he did pass last year, with a diploma or with a bachelor, and he's doing it again because he's hoping for an extra distinction. But the whole purpose is that I just feel like I don't have an opportunity. My parents just do not have the resources to take me to school." And for me, that's another reminder of how, again, those are the remnants of that apartheid system where just black people didn't have opportunities. Now the cycle is going to repeat itself over and over again. Yes, government is trying with NSFAS, but that's not big enough to accommodate the millions of people out there whose parents just simply do not have the money to take their kids to school. So in that sense then is, how do we then change the picture? So if no employment equity, how do we change the picture so that even when the economy grows, there are people who are also growing with the economy, who also become owners and participants in that economy? Do you completely think that we have to scrap employment legislation, or do you think it needs to be tweaked, I guess is my question.
I think we need a balance. And that is perhaps where a compromise kind of platform could come in terms of government of national unity. In other words, I honestly believe the answer cannot only be with legislation that enforces equity regardless. We need incentives for businesses to expand, for people to create and employ people. And you need both, because I think if we do get the economy to grow, then people will feel that they can employ more people and we will create more jobs, etc., etc. And I really understand the situation that you've mentioned with regard to dignity. It's tragic to see people sitting on the street corners and they don't have a job and they are desperate and they need to feed families. It's terrible. And then obviously I don't want even to go there, but if you look at how many people are employed in South Africa who are not from South Africa, those are jobs that South Africans basically should be employed in terms of a number of sectors. But there are various reasons why that is unfortunately not happening. So I think tweak is not good enough. We really need to, and that's why the government of national unity started off in a positive way, because the emphasis was on get this economy to grow and create jobs. And I think that is something that we all agree on. We may have differences as parties on many things, but on that we all agree, and we need to take that as a very serious thing. But we haven't sat down as parties and discussed how do we do that. And if one party says my way is the only way and another party says my way is also the only way, perhaps we will not get anywhere.
Yeah. After the headlines, I'd like you to share maybe some ideas as a Freedom Front Plus. What ways do you think would be your ways that you suggest that we fix it? Because my issue is it's not enough for us to just talk about unity and diversity. Companies are still refusing to transform. Like they are 30 years into democracy. The picture is not changing as much as it should be, which is why then government says, okay, let's introduce legislation. Let's introduce punitive measures. So we'll chat about that after the headlines. I've got some listeners as well with some inputs and questions as we continue this conversation with Dr. Corné Mulder, who is the president of the Freedom Front Plus. It's 10:33.
7:02.
The Clement Maniatela Show.
Let's walk the talk.
All right, 23 minutes now before 11 o'clock. We're in conversation with Dr. Corné Mulder, who is the president of the Freedom Front Plus. I've got some of your WhatsApps that have come on 072-702-1702. If you've got a question or you want to join this conversation, maybe you're a supporter of the Freedom Front Plus and you want to just appreciate the organization for what it does for its constituency, whatever you want to say. 072-702-1702. You can also contact us on 011-883-0702 if you want to call. Let's start with your WhatsApp voice notes.
Good morning, Clement. Can you please ask Dr. Mulder if the Freedom Front believes in transformation? Because I think they're against the likes of BEE. Thank you very much, Peter Maila Machaba from Letswata.
Hi, Clement, and your guest. My question to your guest, Clement, is, don't you think that the failure of the GNU was the failure to formulate a communication team to communicate on behalf of the GNU? Instead, we are relying on political parties to communicate on behalf of the GNU. Thanks, David.
All right. Thank you so much for your questions. Dr. Mulder?
Yes, thank you for the two responses, and I appreciate that. The first one with regard to are we against transformation? Now, that's also an interesting question, because we can have a long debate. What does transformation mean? Transformation could mean that we move away from the previous dispensation that were not acceptable to anybody, and I would agree with that. But transformation also needs to be something that give certainty and accommodation to the minorities in South Africa. They should feel that they are part and parcel of that, and that should be part of transformation, and we would support that, obviously. We also understand that we need to make the playing field level for everybody. That can be done. So that is no problem in that sense.
How do you think we can do that? Just before we move into the next one, how do we level that playing field?
Well, that is the kind of discussion that we need. And as I quickly pointed out earlier, the current way that we tried to do that for the last 30 years did not succeed. The facts indicate that it did not succeed. We did not get the economy to grow. We've got rampant unemployment at the moment. So there's a serious problem in that regard. But the answer can also not be just on the other side where other parties say, but this is the answer. You need to find a unique compromise in terms of how we take this forward. But then we need to talk to each other, and we need to get the business community involved, and the trade unions and individuals, and see how do we do this? How do we structure our economy? We've got all the potential in South Africa. We've got everything is possible. All the capital, the goodwill is there, but we don't have a silver bullet at this stage. And by the ANC, with all due respect, just continuing on their path, the facts indicate that it's not succeeding.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, so is transformation just about growing the economy, or is transformation again about leveling the playing field? And sometimes when there are other external forces or even domestic self-inflicted issues that suppress economic growth, but you still are pushing for, historically disadvantaged people to be part of the economy, that's still transformation. Because I would imagine it's not just about, you don't transform because you want to grow the economy. In fact, with a history like ours, you transform because you come from a history where the other group had closed the doors for possibilities for other groups, and therefore you're trying to just make sure that everybody participates. And just as a follow-up on that, as you respond to it, what I want to understand also is how do we then measure the success of transformation? Because I'm sitting where I'm sitting now because of transformation policies. I know Standard Bank CEO, the group CEO, Sim Chabalala, always tells me when I have him on the show, I've had him and he said, I am the group CEO of the biggest bank by assets on the continent. Why? Because of employment equity. I can mention other black CEOs who would never ordinarily have had the opportunity to be in those positions, but they are. Why? Because there's a government that has said, we cannot allow the situation to remain the same. We need other races to be involved because there are people who are suitably qualified who must be given opportunity. So when we say it's failed, how do we measure it?
I hear what you're saying with regard to yourself in terms of government policies and equity, but I would also want to believe, and I did some homework with regard to your background, etc., and I want to believe that you are there because of merit. I really want to believe. Exactly.
Yes. And transformation is not about lack of merit. Remember, I read, if you read the Employment Act, it says suitably qualified. So if I wasn't qualified, I wouldn't be here.
Exactly. But I think if there's a sufficient emphasis played on that part of equity as well, it will be easier basically to implement and to monitor that. No, I think in the end, if we can become a winning nation, and right, transformation is not only about the economy, it's about a much broader scale and a much broader situation. But you must also understand, there are young Afrikaner children that comes to me that were born 18 years ago, and we've got the New South Africa now for more than 30 years. And they say, but I don't understand. I am struggling. I do not qualify for this. I do not qualify for that. I also want equal opportunities to get forward in life. And from my perspective, we should come at some point where we give our children and our kids and everybody an equal chance to go forward, and we cannot indefinitely continue with certain practices on all sides that are to the detriment of our community and our societies out there. So how do you measure that? I think one would measure that in the end by visibly seeing that, by experiencing that, where you see people that excel, where they are in positions, and where they do what they need to do in terms of the economy. I think there's no one out there that says, no, today we must keep this group out, we must keep that group out. I think we've all moved beyond that. If you want to make a successful country, and we've got the opportunity, South Africa, we should be the locomotive of Africa.
Do you think that we can
respond?
have... Yeah, I'll give you an opportunity.
Yeah,
Just my
sure.
last question on that. Do you think there can be equal opportunities before the playing field is leveled? Let me give a practical example. ABSA, let's say, is looking for a CEO. Historically, ABSA has had white CEOs for decades and decades of its running. And now they're looking for a CEO, and there's a white CEO who applies for a job, suitably qualified. There's also a black CEO who applies for a job who's suitably qualified. And we live in a country where a lot of the JSE listed companies or a lot of the big corporate companies have really not given, let's say, they've not given black people or white women or black women opportunities to lead companies like that. In a case like that, what does a company like ABSA do? Because I would imagine that if ABSA is serious about transformation and wants inclusion and diversity, I think they go for the black person who is just as qualified as the white person. Why? Because historically they've had like over 45 white CEOs and never a black one. So there's an opportunity for them to be part of inclusion, to be part of intentional transformation. The white person, legitimately so, will try and cry foul and say, yeah, but I'm also qualified. Yes, but you explain to the white person that we hear that, but when you look at what the company has done is actually advantage people of your race for the last 50 years. And now we're trying to broaden and open the door to other races as well. Or maybe they give a white woman an opportunity for that matter, just so that there's more inclusion. So my question is then, can we have equal opportunities before we've leveled that playing field? Is that even possible?
Clement, I must be very careful now because I bank with ABSA. No, that's just in lighter vein. Don't worry about that. No, that is what affirmative action should basically be. If you've got two people applying for the situation and they're equally qualified, then affirmative action gives an opportunity to the person that has been previously disadvantaged, and that's how it should be. And I think that has been implemented for quite some time. The business community could come and explain themselves the steps that they take and that they do not take and that they should take. But I think in the end, there's so much potential at the moment. So if you look at the balance sheets of most companies, there are huge amounts of cash being waiting there that needs to be invested. And if you ask in terms of what we need in terms of making this economic growth kind of thing possible, I think one of those things would be policy certainty. And that takes me to expropriation without compensation. You know what it's like if somebody needs to invest, as a company of abroad or a company that needs to expand, as long as there's uncertainty, they hold back, and that is not to the best interest of anybody else. So there are a number of things that needs to be done to make the economy grow. If I could just react to the
GNU one.
The communications one. Absolutely correct. But the problem is this: if you do not come together beforehand and agree between, this was my platform, it didn't get sufficient support, that was yours, same. Now we've negotiated, and this government of national unity, and it should be a very stable, very sound government, because we have 287 seats out of 400. If we've agreed upon a platform, and this is our platform, then the first thing that should happen is there should be joint communications on behalf of the platform, on behalf of the government of national unity. But at the moment, you're absolutely correct. The caller is absolutely correct. The parties are communicating on their own, and each one wants to try and outwit the other, in the belief that at the next election they will once again retain a majority. It's not going to happen.
All right, it's 12 minutes now before 11 o'clock. After the break, more of your inputs and questions on calls and on the 702 WhatsApp line.
You're with Clement Maniatella.
702. Let's walk the talk.
9 minutes now before 11 o'clock. We continue our conversation with Dr. Corne Mulder, who's the president of the Freedom Front Plus. I want to go straight to, in fact, before I go to your WhatsApps, there's a message here from Kingsley, Dr. Mulder. Kingsley said, "Good morning, Clement and Dr. Mulder. Please, can you ask Dr. Mulder if he thinks establishments like Klein Fontaine on Orania are divisive in their existence, given the diverse country we live in, striving to heal old wounds and divisions? Secondly, does he believe that our political landscape is based on social cohesion or fear-based reactive politics? That's a question from Kingsley in Germiston.
Yes, let me respond. I will start with the second part. I do not think that our attempts to social cohesion is based on fear or that kind of uncertainty. I think in the end, we must understand that we are a very diverse society. We've got different histories, we've got different languages, different cultures, different regions, etc. And the dynamic is, how do we live together? How do we live in harmony? How do we go forward? We need to find the right recipe. I'm of the view that the right recipe would be to recognize that diversity, not as an obstacle, but as a strength. A strength where we respect each other, where we take cognizance of our differences, etc. But it will be building blocks to take us further in a positive manner. With regard to Kleinfontein and Orania, no, I don't think that they are divisive. I really don't. If you look at the Constitution, Section 30, Section 31 allows communities to exercise their culture, etc., not to the detriment of anybody else, not to be outside the Bill of Rights, etc. Obviously, they are now being focused upon. The EFF has decided to make an issue of that. The irony is that those communities have good relations with other communities. I know Orania, for example, has good relations and cooperation with other traditional black communities in the Eastern Cape, where they go and they support and they indicate and they show how things could be done and how to make yourself self-sufficient, because the emphasis there is to become self-sufficient. If the state fails in a certain extent to deliver certain services, we would like to see more communities that take responsibility for themselves. I don't think it needs to be divisive. If those things are there to be divisive, I won't support it.
Yeah, and what if the places also say, no black people allowed here, we just want our own people?
No, they don't say that. That's the irony. They really don't say that. They say that you are welcome, but you must understand, in this community, we practice our culture, we practice our traditions, etc. I guess I could tomorrow move to Nkandla, and I may feel a little bit out of kingdom, but I'm welcome to do so, and that's basically what it says. It has to be within the provisions of the Constitution.
But you're not going to see the face of, because there are some people who, and I suppose a lot of people have not really been to Orania, who then make up all sorts of perceptions about it. But for instance, people will say, I don't want to get there and I see the apartheid flag being displayed, or I don't want to get there and I see Verwoerd's portraits being displayed, because it's for them it feels like there's apartheid nostalgia and praising the people who really brought a lot of devastation for black people in this country.
No, I understand that. You won't find the old flag in Orania at all. It's not there. There's a different separate flag, it's just a cultural symbol of that community to a certain extent, but that's not, it comes as part of our history basically, and I can explain that. So I understand that they want to be a positive community, and they are a positive community, developing, trying to get self-sufficient, etc., and I think one should welcome that. And if we can use that model to get society and communities to become more self-sufficient and to not have to rely on a failing state, I think that should be positive.
Please explain that flag, because I think there's some people who've seen when you march as a Freedom Front Plus, for instance, you are taking part in protests, and they see they see it as an old apartheid flag that is being waved at the marches. Can you just explain that?
Sure, let me try to explain. The flag that they use, and that is also the party's flag of the Freedom Front Plus, does have the colors orange, white, and blue. And then on the side, there's a banner, a green stripe as well. That is our flag, that is our emblem. Now, that flag, the origin of that flag is from 1572, when in Europe there was a gentleman called the Prince of Orange, and he was in a religious war between the Protestants and the Catholics, etc. So if you look at the history, the flag that came with Jan van Riebeeck in 1652 historically was just orange, white, and blue. The South African flag and the Union flag is something else, because it's only the orange, white, and blue, and then they added the British Union Jack and the flags of the former Boer republics. That is not part of this flag. And interesting enough, people ask, but why the color green? What is green doing there? And then we explain by saying, you will find the color green in 44 of the 54 countries' flags in Africa. And to us, it symbolizes people who came originally from Europe and other places, but who have made over more than 300 years Africa their home. We became Africans. I quite often say to people internationally when I have interviews, etc., I'm not a European. I'm an African. And if I have to speak in racial terms, I'm a white African. But Africa is my place. I don't have a second passport or family somewhere. I've become an African. And most Afrikaners obviously have been in Africa far longer than Americans have been in America, Australians in Australia. We've become part of Africa. And that's why we've called ourselves and named ourselves to our continent, Afrikaners, Africa. That's who we are.
Dr. Coroner Mulder, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you, Clement. It was a privilege to participate in your show and continue the good work you are doing. Thank you very much.
Looking forward to our further engagements. I really appreciate you spending an hour with us this morning.